The sun is set, and darkness fills the land. The concrete midway slick with spilled beer, cigarette butts, and some things better left unnamed. The air is thick with fog and fry oil, cigarette smoke, and the faint electric tang of a generator about to give up. Neon bleeds into the dark like a wound that refuses to close. A voice cuts through the noise, promising you can win big if you got a steady hand. But behind me, a teenager loses to a rigged game for the third time and laughs anyway, a little too loud and a little too long. Somewhere down the way, a couple is screaming at one another, right by the cheese curd stand, and nobody turns to look, because out here, the ordinary and monstrous wear the same face, and I stopped being able to tell the difference a few stands ago. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Heretical Heathen podcast, and this week we're going to talk about the county fair. Now, I know that was quite a dramatic introduction, and to be honest, it was Claude's idea. Claude has a new feature where you can just talk to it, and my coworker called in tonight, so I just turned Claude on and was bouncing episode ideas off of AI. It's gotten really good now, and it's worth doing if you're doing stuff like this. Or even, I guess, if you're writing or doing any creative project and you have no one to bounce ideas off of, check out Claude and check out some of these new features. They're really dialed in, and it's like talking to a real person, albeit slightly slow. So yeah, like a real person. So as I said, this week, the wife and I went to our local county fair. It was a great time. I somehow spent almost $100 within an hour on what? I'm not exactly sure. We had a couple of beers, a slice of pizza, wildly overpriced, and played a handful of games. And next thing I know, $100 is gone. Just like that. But these things are fun nonetheless. We also watched some races that happen at our county fair. Normally, they think they're supposed to wet the dirt track down. They didn't do that, so there was just dust and sand kicking up, and I wore a nice button-up shirt to not look like a slob, and I just left covered in dirt. But I was sitting there watching races, drinking a beer. It felt like the most American thing I've ever done. And it brought back memories of like when I was a kid and I would go with my parents to these things or to ball games or to races. So I just had some of those memories flooding back, which I really enjoyed. And it wasn't until a few days later that I sort of sat down and thought about it. And I was thinking about how the carnival grounds are a lot like having a spiritual practice. Or maybe the fairgrounds. Some guy there working called it a carnival, but I don't think it's technically a carnival. I think there's a delineation between them. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not that big of a nerd. I don't really care. Carnival ground sounds cooler, that's for sure. So when you have a meditation practice, and I don't mean like a mindfulness meditation, the kind of Western nonsense that we do, like when you have a proper concentration practice, you will notice that your mind doesn't like to focus, and you have to constantly reel it back in. You'll be focusing on a spot, breathing in, and next thing you know, your mind's thinking of colors or things you gotta do, or you notice that there's a little bit of pressure in your back that you gotta release. You shift a little. Maybe when your eyebrow hairs is sort of getting crazy, speaking from personal experience. And you have to catch those moments and think, I'm supposed to be meditating. And then you go back to the concentration practice. And that will happen over and over. But the more that you practice, the better you get and the faster you catch yourself doing this. And I noticed that this same phenomenon that's happening during the meditation practice was happening at the fairgrounds, and it probably happens elsewhere, but I'm going to stick to the fair. My wife and I would be walking along, just looking at the lights, really, like fucking moths, or like moths with beer, just alcoholic moths in Wisconsin. We're just like flapping our wings, moving along, and suddenly somebody will yell out to you, hey, win big, you could win something, food over here, can you pop these balloons, are you good at darts? And there's a sense in which even when you're walking along, much like in your meditation practice, there are these things, these outside influences grabbing your attention. Now it's the fairgrounds, so I just kind of said fuck it and let it happen. And I won my wife some stuffed animals that were wildly overpriced. However, the point still stands. During meditation, there's aversions, things that you're trying to avoid. Sometimes, depending on the practice, that could be the practice itself. Now, if you're out at these events, you might hear children crying, there might be loud music, and so there are things in which you're trying to avoid. But then there is the opposite to that, and that's things that are constantly trying to pull you in. When I'm doing my breath concentration practice, all those things I mentioned earlier, especially the eyebrows, they drive me fucking crazy during meditation. But there's these things that are demanding your attention, like the beer stand and the cheese curds and the smell of all the baked goods and the pizza. And they're constantly pulling at you. And then there's like this third thing that happens, and that's the judging mind, let's say. There's the question during meditation practices like, oh, am I doing this right? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And it felt the same way at the fair when I was asking questions like, well, should I really be doing this? Is this justifiable to spend money on these little skee ball games? Which don't, like, go to a bar, go to arcade. It's way cheaper, way better. But nonetheless, you still have this judging mind going on. And I think before I started this intensive concentration practice, I would have never noticed that these things happening during meditation are happening all the time. And the fairgrounds are just where it made itself known to me, at least in a salient way. And then I had some other interesting realizations. I started thinking that the fairgrounds are a local representation of the Jotnar and Jotunheim. Now, in the myths, Odin and others like Thor and Loki travel into Jotunheim. When we see Odin travel to Jotunheim, it's often in pursuit of wisdom or testing the wisdom of giants. Wisdom? Testing the wisdom of giants. Where in the Prose Edda, Thor and Loki go to meet Utgarda Logi and to deal with a black wizard, kind of. You get to see a lot of strange stuff, like giants that are as big as mountains, and an old lady who can wrestle Thor, and a cat who's actually a serpent. It's actually kind of like a little carnival snippet itself when you think about it. But I started thinking, the way the fairgrounds are sort of put together, let's say, they are kind of a reflection of Jotunheim. There are, we can call them giants, but they're consumers. They're kind of chaotic beings all around you at all times, and they travel from place to place. And as you go through there, they're constantly pulling at your attention, trying to devour you slowly. $8 for a slice of pizza, $5 for a can of beer. You want to throw 5 skee balls? Well, that's $10 right there. Couples are arguing, people are drunk. There's this chaotic sense going on, this energy that's flowing around in the fog. And much like how Odin and Thor travel through the lands of chaotic beings, you too are wandering through chaos itself. The land of the giants, the land of the consumers, the devouring ones, isn't some separate realm that's existing on some far end of the world tree. It's here. It's now. It's all around you and in you. It's floating right by that couple that's had way too much to drink. It's right there on another boring Tuesday night while you're throwing darts at balloons trying to win a stuffed animal that cost that vendor 5 cents when they ordered it from China. And if we accept that I'm right, if the carnival, if the fair, is in fact an allegory for the forces of chaos, for Jotunheim itself, traveling through our lands, then what are we? Who are we might be a better question as we surf through these chaotic waters. Are we Odin? Are we Thor? Are we Loki? Oof, I hope not. But yeah, it kind of felt like, in some sense, traveling through this experience, doing this stuff, is itself an Odinic ordeal. I'm getting old now. I just turned 35 this month. And despite that I have every desire to not go to these things, to stay home and just drink beer and enjoy my peace, Odin doesn't do that. Odin doesn't avoid giant land. He walks straight into it, sometimes in disguise, sometimes not, and he trades pieces of himself for wisdom. So wandering through the fair while staying spiritually awake is itself a mundane thing that can be a spiritual practice. It could even be considered an offering to something higher. Some of the most important offerings we can give is to live out the sacred stories, to embody the Odinic principle, the Odinic god, wandering through Jotunheim as I wander through a fairground with my wife is some of the highest form of worship that we can do. Fuck it. Let's play with this idea a little bit. So, worship doesn't have to be the set aside thing in a sacred space, although that is itself important. You can live out more, I guess, of your mundane life in a spiritual fashion to get closer to the gods. And one of the ways we get closer to the gods is by emulating them. The offerings are cool now, but to emulate a god is to really like become closer to them, to achieve henosis. So if you're an Odin follower like me, going into these chaotic environments, seeking wisdom, is some of the highest form of worship that one can do, along with traveling. And I fucking hate traveling. I hate it so much. But if any of you are married or just into women, they love traveling. They love it so much. No idea why. I don't understand it. I don't even like traveling like 10, 15 minutes to do something that I enjoy. But nonetheless, to be like Odin is to put myself through those situations. So for me, traveling, it's kind of like two forms of worship, right? It's emulating Odin and it's putting myself through an ordeal, a quite sad ordeal when you really think about it. I should be doing stuff that's much more hardcore, and sometimes I do, but that's for a different podcast. So if you're a Thorsman, you should try to emulate Thor. And what does it mean to emulate Thor? Well, Thor is the striker. He's strong. He's a fighter. So one way you might emulate Thor is by going to the gym, learning to fight. Now, you don't necessarily have to be a UFC fighter, but it would behoove you to practice those skills and to be comfortable in those situations and combat evil and combat the giants when it's necessary. Now, did that kind of take us away from our main topic? Absolutely, but part of what I do here is to follow the weird wherever it flows, and you never know how these things are going to go. It's not necessarily always up to me. Sometimes I'm just, I guess, a medium, not in like a gay new age way, but like I am a thing through which I try to let the divine flow through. Doesn't always work. Mostly I get in the way, but every once in a while, maybe something important comes up, and maybe something I said here will strike you too. What I should go back to is talking about the fair and how just these mundane activities in your day-to-day life, with just the slightest reframing, can become some of the most profound sense of worship. You don't have to chant Odin's name 100 times a day. You don't have to do a bloat. You don't have to do something more intense like I might do, where let's say like I go into the woods and I do like a mock hanging or something like that just to play out that story. You could do something as simple as just going to your local fair and just seeing the myths around you and replaying some of those things. Take out your eye for wisdom. See if you can find the meat of poetry right next to the cheese curd stand. I'm so Wisconsin, it's ridiculous. They've tainted me, boys. I used to be a good old Yooper boyo with my pasties, eh? And these fucking Wisconsinites changed me. I don't even talk like that. Now, this might end up being a shorter episode, and maybe I'll release something else in a day or two. I just had nothing going on. And so I just thought about the fair and could start to see how some of the stories played themselves out there. Otherwise, I had literally nothing going on. I've just been going to work. I had my birthday recently. Had to bring my car in to get it fixed on my birthday. Yay. So it's just been a really dull and boring week. So I'm glad I did something. I'm glad I got out there. I'm definitely glad I had a good time doing things with my partner. If there's anything that you guys want me to just ramble about briefly, please let me know. Leave a comment, shoot me a message on X, Substack, Telegram that I kind of use, Instagram, whatever you guys are on. Shoot me a message. I would love to hear what you people want to know about. And before I go, I want to mention another practice I've been doing. So I've talked about the intensive breathing practice where you focus on your breathing, but more specifically on the patch of skin the air hits when you breathe in and breathe out inside of your nostrils. There's a second practice added on top of that, which is a body scanning practice. And everyone who has done meditation has seen this before, or likely has seen this before. And that's where you go from body part to body part, slowly moving up the chain and then relaxing as you go. And I've noticed that adding these two practices before my rituals has has greatly improved my rituals. Fucking words are rough, man. But I've also noticed that while doing things like working, well, that sounded weird. While I'm at work, I've noticed that I will randomly do this. I will think, oh, hey, my shoulder blade's raised. I can feel some tension. I need to relax it. And so by doing these practices, and they only take like 10 minutes of your time, they have effects that radiate out into the rest of your life. So, I mean, obviously, this whole episode has been about how potentially a breathing practice really kicked in and made me notice similarities at the county fair that we went to. But yeah, this body scanning practice is very much the same way. You will notice when you are tensing, you will notice how you're moving, and it will radiate and it will change the way you do things. And it really helped at work because I noticed that I'm in a lot of positions because I work overnights and I work with my hands. I'm not like construction, don't get it twisted, but I work with my hands and I get in a lot of positions where my body's holding a lot of tension. Now, normally I just suffer through the tension, but now, since I've incorporated the body scanning practice, I've learned that I can just relax those body parts in those bad positions and severely reduce the amount of tension that is on my body. So, shout out to Dr. Jared Jones on YouTube, who's been showing me these Buddhist practices. All his content is free. You can also buy his courses and pay him money, but he just puts everything out there for free. He's a great teacher, and now I'm convinced that some of the stuff he's teaching lay practitioners, if you're into the Western magical stuff, these practices should be the foundation. Before you do any theurgy, before you do any ceremony, you should be doing these things first. And I say that as somebody who did the opposite. Like most people, I started with the magic. And with all that rambling, I think it's time for me to head out. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's rant. And if you want to hear anything, please let me know. Thank you all and have a wonderful day. Kind of a short one today.